Welcome back to another episode on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. My name is Bob. The Katana has developed a leak in the rear brake hydraulic system. This episode is going to be about finding that leak and fixing that leak. There are a few pointers to what you might look for if you have a leak in the same system on your bike. The repair will be probably Suzuki Pacific, but it will approximate the repairs that you may carry out on any bike, or particularly any Japanese bike that has hydraulic rear brakes. So this is the reservoir here for the rear brakes, and as you can see it's about half full. It's slowly been losing fluid over a few weeks. I've given it one top up as I've waited for parts to come. We go down from the reservoir, we go down to the master cylinder here. This is the push rod that connects to the rear brake, and that's what actuates the hydraulic pressure. So when the brakes are applied, the pressure occurs in the cylinder here, the master cylinder. Fluid flows up to the top here where there's a banjo bolt as a hose runs down along the swing arm to the rear brakes here. There's only one banjo there, and it shares across the two halves of the brake caliper. Now, we know it's leaking, but just where is the leak? There's some telltale signs here. One is the amount of paint that's peeled off around the master cylinder, and the fact that we can see it wet. If you look down further, you can see evidence of where the brake fluid has been dropping onto the exhaust system, which points to the leak being directly above where the master cylinder is located. The fact that the brakes still work would suggest that the pressure is good along the brake line, but we're looking along the brake line looking for any wet spots. None to be seen. We look here at the back brake. We're not seeing any wet spots around the banjo. And we pop the cover on the caliper. And we're just looking in there. What we're looking for in the caliper is any damp area around the two pistons that are in the caliper. Again, as I say, the fact that the brakes can still be forced on pretty hard would suggest that we've got no pressure leak as such. Which brings us back to the master cylinder here. The fact that we've lost paint, and we can see it works like a paint stripper, brake fluid. The fact that the paint's reasonably peeled off around here. I think the problem is going to lie in the master cylinder. And to fix this, you can replace it. A bit hard to do on some of these older ones, getting the right replacement, but you can always modify a modern one. It's a similar brake arrangement on an awful lot of bikes, so certainly not impossible to replace it. The only things you need to look at is perhaps having the bolt pattern similar, the banjo bolt the same, and the diameter of the master cylinder being the same. A bigger one's always good on the front, but getting a bigger one on the back is not so good. The push rod connects to the foot brake with a clevis pin, which is held in place with a split pin. So I start the removal of the master cylinder unit by removing the split pin. Before undoing the master cylinder, it pays to loosen off the top banjo, because it'll make it a lot easier in getting it out. Now that's a 14mm spanner that's needed for there. It's a 12mm socket for the actual master cylinder. You will notice that I'm using a quarter drive unit, and the reason for this will become apparent in a second. This one here, it's hard to get at without either a universal joint, and that's a bit hard with the 1/2 inch or 3/8 inch drive, but if you use the 1/4 inch drive with the extension, it just fits past the frame member. The other alternative, of course, is to just use a ring spanner or open ender. Captive nut on the other side, so you don't have to worry about finding a nut on the other side to hang on to. Now I've undone the split pin here. You can pull out the clevis pin. It's all reasonably loose. There's no worries there about the brake light, because it's actually connected to the foot pedal mechanism, not to the master cylinder. The last one to undo is the actual brake fluid reservoir, and it's a 10mm. Look, it's a whole lot easier with sockets, but you could use a spanner if you like. So it's a 10mm socket that I'm using to undo it. And you lift up away from there, and then it sort of drops down, and you need to get the banjo undone. And with that undone, you can remove the unit and back out. So put a rag there, catch any brake fluid, but honestly it'd be better to just try and clean the brake fluid off. It's a whole lot easier if you took the airbox off, but that's a lot more work. I'm just using my finger to undo the banjo bolt. There are 2 washers, one on each side of the banjo itself, so don't lose those. If you're really worried, you could retemper the washers, but I don't normally worry too much. I do have some new ones. I may reach for some new ones, but honestly I've found in practice that it's not a big deal. Now you don't want any rubbish getting into the system. You'll find that it won't leak very much at all because of gravity. All the fluid is downhill at the moment. But just to prevent any damage, I'm just putting a sock over it. Or if you've watched my shop tour video, you'll know that it's secretly called a condom. So now it just becomes a juggling act of getting the master cylinder out past all the other bits. And you know what? It might be a whole lot easier if I take the airbox out. I was trying not to do that, but I think I'm going to have to. So, trying to save work, I didn't take the airbox out. Having taken the airbox out, it comes out as easy as anything. So that's the unit we want. We'll take it over to the bench and operate on it. Over on the bench we're ready to operate. Just try and get rid of the last of the brake fluid that's in there. Now, I'll just have a quick inspection of the hose itself, because you just never know. They don't last forever either. So start by undoing the hose clamp to the pipe that runs from the reservoir, and pull that off. And then take the boot off, and that's pretty sad in there. Pulling the boot back has revealed a rusty end to the master cylinder, very mushy. The boot should pull back. Oh, here it comes. Of course, always in the weather being under the bike. Old toothbrushes always come in handy. This is not the cleaning cycle. There is a circlip there. I just want to clean this grit and everything away first. The circlip or snap ring holds a steel plate in place at the front of the master cylinder. This plate ensures the pushrod does not fall out, and along with the boot prevents road grime from entering the master cylinder. I was just using a bit of brake cleaner. You don't have to use brake cleaner. Probably a bit of kerosene paraffin would work just as well. At this point, you're not worrying about contaminating the brake fluid, because you're going to be replacing the whole setup. You can just see the internal circlip there. I think you can just see the internal circlip. Righto, let's see if we can get it to come. So it's well corroded in, we can say that. Don't really want to resort to any heat, but we might have to. One of the joys of being cameraman and presenter is that there are times when you forget to turn the camera on, and this is just what I did here now. I'm not going to do a reenactment, but I will show you what I did to get it out, and hopefully it'll make sense. So I put the assembly in here, clamping the push rod, and I used a bearing separator, but essentially I put the bearing separator there. I had the master cylinder here, push rod clamped in the vise, and I just did up the bearing separator and it just pulled it out. Simple as that. It all went on the floor. That's always exciting. And but it's out now. So you start off with an inspection of the master cylinder itself. We're looking down the bore I don't know, can you see down the bore? No, yes. We're looking down the bore and we're looking for corrosion in the bore. If we see corrosion in the bore, there's a couple of options there. We can just replace it or re-sleeve the bore, but that option is only warranted when you cannot replace it. And I must say, when I went online, I didn't see any replacements for this model, but it's all nice and shiny down there. In my experience, the wear is always in the cups, and it's the cups that we will be replacing. But in the meantime, it's just a bit of cleaning up, which I will not bore you with. So cleaning everything up, and I'm just doing a quick repair in this rubber. I'm using a product called super glue. Got a new snap ring. I had to provide that. This is how it goes together. I've cleaned up the cylinder and it's ready to go. Now, this is the Suzuki part 69600-45820. It's an overhaul kit for the rear brake master cylinder. I'll give you a lot for the money. So you get a new spring, a new piston and cap, and a new diaphragm. So your cap goes there. Your diaphragm goes in the end of the spring, like so, and that should sit there, so I'm just pushing it in. It's got a metal base, so don't be afraid to put a bit of pressure on it. Now, before we fit the new components, we're just going to soak them in a bit of brake fluid. So this is new brake fluid. It's Penrite .4. You can use .3. .3 was the original fluid provided in these. I'm happy to use .4. It happily replaces .3 in this situation. What I like about the Penrite stuff is that it has a seal at the top. I don't like the ones that come without a seal. You always worry that a bit of moisture's got in. And that's all the new components. I'll let them soak for a minute or two. We are ready to reassemble the master cylinder now. I'm getting everything ready, getting on some gloves. It's all clean in there, no dirt to be seen. Just going to drop down a little bit of brake fluid. So when you're reassembling master cylinders, brake fluid is your lubricant. Okay, the way it goes is this spring goes in first, that little diaphragmy thingy goes up the end. Then the next one is this cup. Righto, so we can see that that's sitting square at the top. We can now push it down, and of course being a cup, brand new, it's hard to push down, and then this one goes in. I have positioned the snap ring above the retainer disc at the end of the push rod before inserting its ball end into the cup at the end of the piston. I then use the push rod to drive the piston down into the cylinder, and then gripping the snap ring with the circlip pliers, insert it into its recess. And always make sure it's seated properly. Finally, the rubber boot is refitted to the end of the cylinder. Now you got to think about how this goes back. It goes back like that, and you're probably not critical the reservoir will be done up just now. Give you time to manoeuvre it into position, and we're ready to go and put it back on the bike. Back at the bike, we're ready to refit. As it turned out to be, much easier without the airbox in the way. So the first thing I'm doing is I'll put the clevis pin in. I'll start fitting the bolts. I'll put the brake line back on. There's the washer top and bottom. As I say, you can anneal these washers. I don't normally worry. A lot of people, most people don't, to be honest. They've been on and off a few times, I would, but I can't remember the last time I had these off. Now make sure you've tightened these up, and with those tightened up, it's no drama to tighten this one up. There'll be a torque value somewhere, I don't know what it is, it's just tight as far as I'm concerned. And do up the hose clamp at the bottom. Must not forget the split pin that goes in the clevis pin that holds the arm on. Okie dokie. Now all we need to do is bleed the system. Off camera I've just finished bleeding the brakes. Just be a process now of putting the airbox back in. So, locks on quite nicely, all good, good pressure, all set to go. This bottle of brake fluid I'll keep for about a month, and then if it doesn't be needed, I'll throw it out. Okay, we're all done. The job takes probably about 2 hours if you're not filming it. So it didn't take that long to do. It's an easy enough thing to do. Just making sure you have the overhaul kit, a new split pin and a new snap ring, internal snap ring to go in. And of course some brake fluid. That's it for this one. I hope you found it useful, and if you need to do that to your motorbike, well, I hope that you've got enough information there to do your own work. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to talking to you on the next episode. Bye.